people are viewing what's possible through the lens of what they already have. The story that people have is, well, that's okay for them, but I can't achieve that because.
And then they create a story which basically like justifies those results.
Our brain is designed to keep us safe, and the way that it does that is it learns patterns of behavior. People listening to this will go, well, this seems all a bit deep. Like, I really do just need more leads. Well, you do need more leads. Like, that's the thing that you need. But how you get those leads isn't by some magic strategy or formula.
One of the things that really helped me to really get into and understand and uncover the pattern was
Have you ever felt stuck? Like you've been trying lots of different things, but not really making progress or moving forward. Maybe there's a challenge that you've had in your life for a long time, and you're not quite sure why you're experiencing it. In this episode, I'm going to sit down with Dave Raybould, who is our head coach at Creative Life. And we're just going to lift the lid on some coaching principles that we have found create serious shifts and transformational results for our clients. So if you are feeling a bit stuck right now, or you have a problem or challenge that you want to shift, this episode is for you. As always, if you enjoyed it and got some value, please hit that subscribe button and share it with a friend. I guess why I wanted to unpack this a little bit is because I know for people listening, they might be in a similar situation. And I know there's going to be a certain amount of people listening to this podcast who just feel a bit stuck right now. And things are okay, but they're not ultimately where they want to be. And I think there are certain aspects of that situation that we notice from a coaching perspective, and having coached hundreds of people over the last decade, that won't become apparent to those people unless they have a conversation or listen to this podcast. And so for me, I guess one of the reasons I wanted to really unpack this is because I didn't want these insights to be kept to just the people that you and I are having conversations with. I wanted to try and shed some light on this for people, even if they never speak to us one-to-one.
what I notice is that people come to us with an idea of what they want as the solution, which is generally like more leads and more sales. So, and what we have been trained to do in coaching, and one of the reasons that I resonate with you, Matt, on wanting to lift the lid on these conversations that we have, because they're quite intimate conversations, because we talk to people often about what's really important to them, what they really struggle with, maybe some of their kind of doubts or fears and things that they might not talk about in public. So it's quite hard to give an insight into those conversations without actually having them, which is what inspired us to be having this conversation today. So people come to us with an idea about what they want. It's generally like leads, or I just need more sales, or I just need my staff to do what they're told, or I wish my freelancers would do what they're told, or would be more, take more ownership for their work and that kind of thing. Whereas that's the presenting agenda. Whereas what we do in coaching, which can sometimes be to the frustration of the person that we're talking about, is we look at what's the deeper story here. You know, what's the deeper understanding of this thing that they're presenting with, and then really what's the transformational idea. And what I've seen you doing in coaching when I've watched you coach is you are constantly looking for and seeking out this, what's this transformational idea that they're not seeing, and how can I point them, you know, through powerful questions towards that. And they're sometimes like, oh, well, I just want to get more leads. And what you do is you help them, or I help them to look a bit deeper into that question and uncover the things that might truly be getting in the way, that are quite hard to talk about, or they just haven't had the space or time to talk about, or they haven't spent time with someone with a skill to help them and facilitate their exploration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for people listening, they might be thinking, okay, well, how does this apply to me? So let's just kind of start there. So if you are listening to this and you're feeling a bit frustrated right now, and you feel like you have been trying lots of things to solve a specific problem in your business, like Dave mentioned, maybe it's like you want to get more leads, or maybe it's as simple as you keep losing pitches, or you send proposals and people ghost you, or there's members of your team that aren't really performing the way that you want them to perform, or you're not charging what you want to be charging, or you're getting a lot of resistance around pricing that you're pitching to clients. It kind of almost doesn't matter what the symptom is. But if you are experiencing something consistently, i.e., this has been happening for a few months, oftentimes in the case of the people that we speak to, a few years, and you feel like you tried lots of things, but it's really not working, then it's worth you listening to this podcast and staying tuned. Because what I want to dive into now are 2 or 3 key principles, big ideas that I think most people miss. And the way I want you to think about this metaphorically is if you imagine a photographer and they've got a great big zoom lens on, and they're zoomed into a particular scene, and they're kind of moving that lens around, they're looking around, and they're kind of focused on different areas, and they're getting frustrated because they can't understand why they can't find the subject in the shot. And so what they really need to do is they need to either switch that lens out and get a kind of wider lens so they can see the full scene, or they just need to take the camera away from their head totally and use their eyes and look around until they find that subject and then go back to the lens. And that's kind of what's happening for most people who are running a creative business. They are so zoomed in to this specific problem, or like Dave said, the way that it's presenting itself, that they can't actually see what's really going on. And so there's a few things that I want to mention, and I want to start with this idea of people who tell us they just want more of the same when we ask them what they want. And so you might not even realize you're doing this. If someone says to you, what do you want? And you say, oh, well, I want better paying clients. Okay, well, how much do you want your clients to be paying you? Oh, well, instead of charging 25 grand, I'd love to be charging double that, 50 grand. Okay, great. So really, you just want to increase your prices. Like, is that all this is really about? And then you just kind of dig into that conversation. And you realize, well, it's not all it's about. It's about the kind of clients they're attracting. It's about the kind of work that they're doing. It's about the creative freedom they have in that work. It's about the process, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start with this idea of why, in your opinion, Dave, people are limited to this perspective when you ask them what they want.
I think that one of the things that you and I talk about often, Matt, is this idea of the ideas that people have in their minds about why they don't have something that they want. And one of the things that I notice is people have created a story around why they don't want what they want. Like it's a set of ideas which they believe to be true, which justify their current results. For example, oh, well, the market's just difficult right now, or, people aren't really buying right now, or people have contracted their budgets. Companies aren't spending money. And in our industry right now, this or this happens, and you just need to understand that this is how it is. So they have an idea about what they are getting, and then they create a story which basically like justifies those results.
What is it about that story that limits people's perspective in terms of getting what they actually want?
Well, I think that they are very heavily justifying why they're getting more of the same. So therefore, in their minds, they're anticipating getting more of the same. So is it any wonder that people get more of the same? Because they're almost creating a reality for themselves, basically.
And is that because they don't believe that they can have the things that they truly want?
Firstly, they don't always have an idea. Like if you ask them about their vision is just it's not really the thing that really drives or motivates them. So therefore, they don't really have an idea truly what they want, and you uncover beliefs that they have, which again don't really align to the things that they want. So people hold on to a lot of baggage essentially that gets in the way of them doing things that would create the things that they might want in their life or business. And how does that show up? It shows up in doubts. It shows up in fears. It shows up in the stories that people tell themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. From my perspective, what I've noticed is that people are viewing what's possible through the lens of what they already have. And so I love the example of the 4-minute mile, the Roger Bannister, right? It's like if someone told you to run a 4-minute mile, that would feel almost impossible because you have no evidence that it is possible. And so people are basically referencing their own experience as a benchmark for what is possible. And to me, that's the fundamental problem, is that they're looking at what they've already got. They're looking at their past as an indicator of what is possible in the future. And so what that means is that you're always grounded in a particular reality. So you can only see things through that reality. Now, for anyone that's not familiar with the Roger Bannister 4-minute mile, Roger Bannister was one of the first people, I'm pretty sure he was the first ever person to run a mile in 4 minutes. So prior to that, no one had run a mile within 4 minutes. But the year that he ran that, something like 32 people ran a mile in 4 minutes as soon as they knew that was possible. Since then, thousands of people have run a mile in 4 minutes or under. And I can't remember what the actual record is now, but it's a fair amount lower than that. So what happened there was people's perception of what was possible shifted. And I think this is one of the key elements, is that we can look around and we can follow people on YouTube and we can read books about people that have built these successful businesses. But I think coming back to your point about story, the story that people have is, well, that's okay for them, but I can't achieve that because. And then it's like, oh, well, they did that in that industry, or they did that in that particular country, or they did that because insert the belief. But for me, that wouldn't work because I've got an animation studio and people don't pay that much for animation. Or I'm based in Portugal and the market in Portugal is different over here than it is in the rest of the world. Or, we could go on for days, right? So it's like there's kind of two things going on. Number one is that they're referencing what they believe is possible based on their past experience, which was created by the pattern, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is they then create a story which reinforces that belief. And so when you ask someone what they want, they tell you what they want in the context of what they've already experienced.
I love that idea. And I'm a sort of action sports enthusiast. I've always snowboarded or skateboarded or mountain biked or done something. And it really shows up in all those different sports as well. Like this idea of what's possible, and everyone buys into that idea, and people tend to just do more of the same. And then suddenly an outlier, someone who completely broke the mold, does something that pushes the envelope of that sport. And then suddenly everybody else elevates themselves to that standard. And you see that with kids that are growing up today. Their ideas of what is possible, the tools that they have to train for it are different. And they're excelling their idols at 8 years old or 10 years old.
Yeah, crazy, right? Like I remember when Tony Hawk did the first 900 and it was like in the X Games or whatever, and it was the biggest thing and it was just insane. And now I was in a sports bar a few weeks ago and there was like the X Games on, and there were people just like a 900 is just like a standard trick now. It's like, oh, you only did a 900-degree rotation. That's we'll give you 10 points for that. So it's just so funny how these things progress. So what I'd love to do so that people get value from this episode, is really define these key principles that keep people stuck and prevent them from really achieving what they want to achieve. And then for each one of those things, really list out tactical, practical things that people can do in order to break through those, I guess. So the first one is this idea of limited thinking, i.e., not really aiming for what you want to aim for because you don't believe it's possible. So that's the first thing that we see, and we often push people on that belief. What else do you see in terms of beliefs and patterns that we know, based on our experience, keep people really stuck?
I think that just to kind of riff off what you just said, the people that they associate themselves with is also a good place to start, right? If people are in an environment where everybody's kind of at the same level or doing the same things, then they'll tend to build their set of beliefs about what's possible based upon what they see around them, which is why it can be hard for people who might be the first business owner out of a few generations of their family. My parents were both a civil servant and a teacher. They had never worked for themselves. They had never run businesses before. So therefore, for me, coming into creating a coaching practice, it was quite a different paradigm. So therefore, I had all these ideas about what I could create and what might be possible that were very incremental. But when I experienced coaching, my coach just completely blew those ideas out the water. And I was pretty shocked and quite overwhelmed by this idea of what might be possible, because they were looking at me and my life objectively through a different lens. And that lens was working in an environment with all sorts of people who had done extraordinary things. So, a tactical, practical way, firstly, is working with a coach who sees things differently, but it could also be, elevating your network, or thinking about the types of people who you associate yourself with. Like, what do they aspire towards? And is that aligned to what you want or not?
Yeah, and we both met through one of those groups. We both worked with Daniel Priestley many moons ago, and I remember the program that we were on was called Threshold, and the main focus of that program was to get our business to the VAT threshold, which at the time I think was £85,000. Now, that just seemed crazy to me. I mean, I could kind of fathom how I could do that selling websites with a team and all of that, but I just had no idea how I was going to create that as a business coach. And I had all of these stories about what one person can earn on their own, what someone could earn as a life coach or a business coach. And it honestly just seemed like an impossible task. And I can't remember their name, but I remember the first person that broke that, and they said they had done like 3 months in a row back to back at the VAT number, which was 8,500 a month or 7,500 a month, whatever the math works out to be. And I was like, oh my God, there's people here that are actually doing this. And I think it was a brand new business. And then more and more people started doing it. And then it just became the norm. Like, everyone started saying, oh yeah, that's the first base you've got to get to. And I remember being surrounded by those people that were just doing that, and then going to the next level where there's people just doing multiple 6 figures and 7 figures. And all of a sudden your eyes and your mind just get opened up to this idea of what's really possible. So just kind of shifting gears a second, I really want to get your perspective on this. So just for the context of people listening, when Dave joined our team, I was taking all of our enrollment calls and I was doing a lot of coaching. And so our goal was twofold. Number one was to get Dave up to speed on our kind of coaching methodologies, because Dave, although had a lot of coaching experience, hadn't been exposed to the creative world exclusively. So he'd coached a very broad range of people, and I wanted to get him familiarized with our content and our frameworks and our structure. So that was sort of goal number one, so that he could take over all of the one-to-one and get results for people and people be happy. And then the second goal was for you to be able to take some of the enrollment calls. And so one of the things that we first worked on was this idea of spotting the pattern. And I told you that everybody that came to an enrollment call, no matter what they wanted or what their challenge was, the thing that was actually holding them back was the pattern. So do you want to just tell me from your perspective what that kind of process has been like and what you understand now about the pattern, just to kind of give people listening a little bit of insight into that process and hopefully be able to kind of shift some of these things for themselves?
Yeah. And one of the things that I was trained on in coaching, like coach training teaches you to do, is to listen for what's really going on for someone, and to be almost like a doctor who's looking for you. Like, people are coming to you and they're describing a bunch of symptoms. And then what we're trying to do as coaches is understand what's really driving that, what's creating their experience, and what's creating their current results. And what the deeper agenda and the transformational agenda, so like the things that people maybe aren't aware of in the conversation, are their psychological beliefs or tendencies. So the things that they maybe don't vocalize externally, but are a set of thoughts and beliefs that happen internally, which give them a sense of what their reality should be. And ultimately, those patterns are there for very, very good reason. They're there ultimately to protect us and to allow us to make sense of a complex and quite random world. It helps us to make order to things.
What is your understanding of a pattern, and what do we mean when we're talking about patterns for people listening and don't really understand that idea or that concept?
For example, one of the ones that I encountered the other day is like, I want to build this business, but so I want to get more sales and do this, but people aren't buying right now. Or I want to get more budgets I want to increase people's budget or increase my pricing, but people just aren't willing to pay that much. So that it's like some generalizations about how things are, which mean, again, coming back to what we spoke about earlier, which kind of justify the results that they're getting. So, underneath that is a thought or belief that is driving that idea for them, and to settle for the fact that, oh, well, just people aren't buying right now, so I'm just going to, keep on sending proposals. Or another belief that we see often is, oh, well, people just want proposals. So I just sent a proposal and then they told me I was too expensive, so I need to reduce my prices. So it's the things that make the people that we're speaking to accept that idea. The idea being that I just need to send proposals, and I just need to send more proposals, and I just need to lower my prices because people say it's too expensive.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like one element of it, right? From my perspective, the pattern is the full circle. So the belief is part of the pattern, but the pattern is really your internal operating system. So it's how you make sense of the world, and it's the way that your brain learns to keep you safe. And so the belief is a part of that, because our beliefs determine the way that we show up in the world. But it's kind of cyclical. And you mentioned this before we hit record, about the beliefs and the thoughts that you have, the actions that you take, and the results that you get. So when I'm on a call with someone, I'm really listening for what is the way of being or the way of them operating in the world that is currently creating this result consistently. And in my experience, you can always reverse engineer it. And so let's take a really tangible example of somebody who is chronically undercharging, and anytime they try and raise their prices, they get objection or pushback from the prospect. Now, if that's happening consistently, I can guarantee that there's a pattern there. And the pattern will be reinforced by a particular belief, like you've just demonstrated. But it kind of comes back a little bit further than that. And when I say that, what I mean is there is a way that that person interprets that information, which is usually based on prior experiences. And that's when I say, like, the way of operating, on the operating system. As you know, our brain is designed to keep us safe, and that's its fundamental goal. And the way that it does that is it learns patterns of behavior. So when you're a kid and you put your hand on a hot stove and you burn your hand, your brain goes, red things and warm things are bad. Don't put your hand on it, right? And it generalizes around that. And that's very useful to keep us alive. The problem comes when it creates too many generalizations, kind of like what you said, right? So you get bitten by a dog or a dog scares you, and then like all dogs are dangerous or all dogs are bad. So with the pricing example, when we dig down into that, there can be a myriad of beliefs that undermine that. But the overarching pattern is the way that those beliefs play out. So I charge this amount. I then think about charging more, or I try and charge more. And as a result of that thought, an emotion is created based on my previous conditioning around money, which then changes the way that I show up to that conversation, changes my way of being. And that changes the result I get in that sales conversation. And so for me, that's the pattern I'm always looking for. When you do this thing that you know is more likely to move you to the result, i.e., quote more money or add an extra zero on that proposal, how does that change the way that you show up? Or how does that change your behavior? And for most people, there's such a drastic change in their behavior that it impacts the result that they get, which means that it's usually an undesired result, which people tell them they're too expensive, right? Do you want to just like pick up on that thread and add anything to that based on things that you've seen recently?
What we've seen is people kind of wanting to change and wanting to increase their prices, for example, but really, you know, that they haven't really challenged the underlying beliefs. And so they kind of go out to evidence why it's not going to work. So they'll go out and like almost martyr themselves to the idea by going out and, oh, well, I tried to increase our prices and I got a bunch of resistance or whatever. But really, they were never bought into it in the first place. So they're kind of like, they go out into the world and are almost trying to validate their own thinking that people won't pay that, won't pay more than that.
Yeah, because that's in alignment with the way that they see the world, right? And this is what I find really interesting. I learned this from Tony Robbins, which is that our behavior will rarely deviate from the identity that we have about ourselves. So if we believe that we are someone who is kind and considerate and conscientious as a person, and we also have a belief that in order to be kind, considerate, and conscientious, if you see a business or a person struggling, you should do whatever it takes to help them, even if that means lowering your price or over delivering or whatever it is. You will continually do that in spite of any evidence that is presented outside of that pattern, because it's like identity, I am kind, conscientious, caring. Belief, kind, conscientious, and caring people don't charge a lot of money for what they do because that's unethical or whatever the belief is, right? And so it's like pattern, belief, and therefore that informs behavior. And that's the powerful bit. And when you can help people not just see the belief, but you can actually see the pattern that is creating and reinforcing that belief, which is usually associated to their identity, who they believe they are, then that's when you can have those kind of transformational and powerful conversations. Have you got any examples that you want to use? Obviously, you don't have to name names, but have you got any examples that you want to use from recent enrollment calls you had or recent clients that we've been working with that you can sort of back up this point or kind of expand on it in any way?
Yeah, there's a couple of phrases as well that I was just thinking about as you were talking. The phrases are, I'm not the kind of person that does X, or it's just my personality, right? To not want to charge too much money or whatever. So it's a very strong idea about about who I am as a person. And it's almost like in a coaching session, people come to us and they're trying to convince us as to why it is the way that it is. And you just don't understand. You need to see that this is how it is, kind of thing. And what we've trained ourselves to do is to just be curious and to ask questions. So some of the things that people come to us experiencing might be like sales or revenue. Revenue is a good representation of it. You know, we had a difficult year last year, and it's because of the market, for example, or it's because of this. But when you dive a little bit deeper, another thing that people do as well. So people have this idea about I'm just the type of person that does X or Y. Another one is that people switch from saying I to you. So they make generalizations. So for example, people say, when you just experience this, or when you make a proposal to a client and then they push back about the price because of for whatever reason, they don't own it. So it's kind of like they're trying to distance themselves from it, if you know what I mean. So that's one of the things that often happens. So they switch into you versus I. People say I'm just the kind of person that.
Let's use some specific examples, because I think people would really benefit from some specific examples. And again, we don't have to name names, but just pull some things out from some of your coaching sessions you've had recently and just explain how that pattern's showing up.
One of the recent examples is from an enrollment call, and there is the idea that I know that I need to ask for more referrals. Let's take that as an example. But actually, when we talk about it, they've got no real referral strategy in place. So they kind of know that they should ask for more referrals because that was their main source of leads. However, when you ask them about it, they haven't really got a strategy around it. And then we ask them, okay, so, what's some of the things that get in the way of you asking for referrals or whatever? And then that's where the story comes up. So the story might be, oh, well, people don't necessarily want to refer us, or we don't always ask, or it's, yeah. So there's a whole bunch of stuff which basically justifies why they don't do it, essentially, as opposed to just saying, oh, yeah, you're right. We could really do with a referral strategy. Let's do that. There's a bunch of stuff that comes up which says, oh, we just don't want to be pushy. There's another one as well. I'm not the kind of person that's pushy.
And then let's go a layer deeper. So then what's the pattern behind that?
The pattern is around their beliefs around money or their beliefs around what it is to ask for things.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what kind of person would you have to be to continually ask people for things? Like, I would have to be a selfish person, or I would have to be something that they totally don't identify with. And so then it comes down to this like identity belief of, I'm not the kind of person, or sometimes a lot of the time it's people were taught something when they're growing up. I know I can definitely relate to this in sort of other areas of my life. We were taught that this is the way things are. So sometimes people were often taught like, oh, you shouldn't ask people for things because it's rude, or you should only ask for what you need and nothing more than that. And so it's at a young age when these beliefs are usually installed, and a really simple concept like that can be ingrained in someone's mind, and they carry it through their entire life, and it bleeds into their business, and they will have this belief deep down, which maybe they didn't even realize they had. And it's showing up in so many areas of their life, with them being a little bit conscious of it, but usually it's an unconscious pattern. So I'll give you one more example, which is one that I found fascinating recently from a coaching call. So we have a client who, I won't say his name or allude to what his business does or anything, but we have a client who has been helping businesses to retain more students in their programs. And he tried a bunch of things that didn't work. Like, clients spent quite a lot of money with him and his business, and they didn't really get the outcomes that they wanted. And so the belief or the narrative that he created around that was, I'm not good enough to solve that problem, or I can't solve that problem, and therefore I need to go and find another problem that I can solve. Rather than, okay, let's figure out why that didn't work and let's make our product really good and let's double down on that thing. The belief is, if we don't get the result or we get negative feedback, that's an indication that we then should move on to something else. And so the way that shows up in his business is he's constantly jumping to new ideas and constantly jumping to new things. And like, when you see it from the outside, you're like, oh, this person, anytime faced with a challenge wants to go and find a new problem or a new challenge or a new thing to fixate on. So what's going on there? Like, what's the thing that's underlying that? And when I dug down into it in that coaching session, it literally was something that he's done all of his life. It's like this idea that he is so responsible for his clients and their results that he can't bear to let them down in any way or take someone's money and not quite get the outcome that they were hoping for. And that was a pattern through his childhood where it was like he was taught that he should make everybody else happy and make sure that everybody else is okay. And that was his like number one priority. And so then he brings that into business. And we all do. And we all have these patterns. And that's why they're so powerful. And so I think the reason why I wanted to have this conversation and the reason why I was so driven to kind of lift the lid on this a little bit is because most people don't realize how much this affects their ability to get the outcomes and results that they want. Most people are so fixated on the external and the symptoms they're experiencing, trying to fix them with tactics and strategies and let's try this and let's do this thing. And oh, I worked with this guy, but it didn't work, and jumping from course to course and coach to coach and, you know, book to book, when really they need to look internally and ask themselves like the question that I used to get asked by my coach, which was one of the hardest questions to answer, which is, why am I creating this? Why am I creating this result consistently? Which forces you to look internally rather than externally. And I know this is something that you've done. So do you want to share anything from your life or business where you've had to kind of do that introspection and you've uncovered things that were keeping you stuck?
Yeah, there's many things that are just jumping to mind as you were giving that example. One of the ones at the moment, a current one for me, is wanting to put myself out there more. So like wanting to produce more content, wanting to publish more stuff, wanting to kind of present myself more in the world, work on my personal brand and all that kind of stuff. And what I find happening is that my day and my week happens and I start the week all excited to do that thing. And then at the end of the week, I look back and I'm like, the things that I avoided or didn't happen to be the tasks that relate to that thing. So I'm kind of, that's my pattern at play.
Okay, so that's awesome. Let's break this down, right? Let's almost do this in a bit of a coachy way. So, because I think people can relate to this. So there's this thing that you consciously and logically know you could, and maybe even you tell yourself you should be doing more of. And in your case, it's kind of like putting yourself out there more. And that means creating more content, doing things like that, this, being on podcasts, stuff like that. And so you have this awareness of the thing that you want to do, but then for some reason, it constantly feels like you never get the time or the energy, or like, just describe the feeling to me when that sort of doesn't happen.
Okay, well, it was even happening right before this. We were going to come into recording this podcast. Like part of me is like, I'm not ready. You know, I don't really have the energy today. I'm not feeling up to it. I feel quite tired. I'm like lethargic. And this real strong resistance comes up to doing the thing. I get distracted. I might prioritize something else.
Okay, so you kind of notice this internal narrative that comes in. Is there anything else that accompanies that?
A strong sensation of, it's not even apprehension. It might just be fatigue or like distraction.
Yeah, and it's almost like our body starts actually creating physical things in order to prevent us from having to do the thing that we know we want to be doing more of, right?
Big yes. Yeah. And you know, and to go a bit deeper into that and into kind of my past, one of the things that really helped me to really get into and understand and uncover the pattern was meditation. For people who don't know this about me, I've done thousands of hours of meditation. I did retreats, like 10-day silent retreats. I think I did 5 like 10-day ones. And then that's like hundreds of hours of meditation over 10 days, and a lot of therapy, a lot of psychotherapy, and kind of really getting into some of the things that drove me to experience a lot of quite negative stuff in my life. And the practice and exploration helped me to uncover my patterns and beliefs, a lot of them had been born through childhood and my experiences growing up, and some of the messages that I got told, or some of the things that I created to help me stay safe as a young human, and how they presented in my adult life. And that really showed up in coaching, because if I wanted to go out and create a business, I had to go out and talk to people. And part of me really didn't want to go out and talk to people. So for me, that that was the pattern. The pattern was this fear of being seen, and how that presented was that I didn't take action on the things that I might want to, and it can still show up for me today. In fact, I was coaching a guy who owns a business the other day, and this is happening for him. He knows he needs to do more sales and create partnerships, but the one thing that never happens in his week is, making sales calls, or creating partnerships, or taking those actions. They just stay on his list and he avoids doing them. So I think that's how it presents often to people.
Yeah. And so from a coaching perspective, we label this as the resistance, right? And the reason we label it as the resistance is because that's kind of how it feels. It's like you're resisting doing this thing that you know is going to get you more of what you want. And so for you, this resistance shows up in narrative, it shows up in internal narrative, it shows up in feeling. So there's a few layers. The layer is identifying the thing that we know we should be doing, then noticing like what resistance is coming up as a result of that. And then the layer below that, which I've never found a way really to do, maybe through meditation, but I've never really found a way to do it effectively on my own. I've always had help from an external perspective identifying this. And I think this is why coaching is so powerful, is figuring out what you said, like, what is my brain trying to protect me from? Because usually that is just what resistance is. Like if you're standing on a tall bridge and you get a feeling of resistance when you move towards the edge, or a feeling of fear, it's protecting you because it doesn't want you to fall off. And going back to this idea of early conditioning and early programming, it's like, what is it protecting me from? So do you want to just share, because we had this conversation the other day, didn't we? And we kind of uncovered this pattern. We uncovered this like younger version of you that was experiencing this resistance. Do you want to just share with us like what's creating that for you? What belief, what idea, what piece of identity is creating that resistance?
The presenting agenda in this conversation is, okay, I need to either make more sales calls, right, or have more conversations, or produce a piece of content that gets published. But what we explored and what's going on beneath that, for me, and what we can notice in the people that we work with, is the pattern for me is when I was like 9 years old, and I was very, very anxious, apprehensive, young human, that being seen was risky because I got bullied, and like I was just kind of, I remember I moved schools. My parents had divorced when I was like 7, and I was in a very uncomfortable place in life. And this very strong association got built that to be seen was dangerous. And I'd be judged and criticized and ostracized from a group of people. So therefore, to do that was dangerous, which is why, things that happen to young humans can be so influential, because we build these barriers to doing things when we're older. So for me, that was my pattern. My pattern was born through my sort of 7 to 9 year old self that would come back up and be like, don't do it. This is a dangerous action or activity. So, let's be safe. Let's just not be seen.
And this links back to a podcast that I recorded a couple of weeks ago around parts work, and this is why I've found parts work so valuable. Because prior to doing parts work, I used to just think like, oh, that is me. Like there's resistance coming from me, but actually it's not. It's a part of me, and usually a younger part of me. And you've just identified that, and it's like this 9-year-old boy who basically was afraid of putting himself out there because of the consequences that happened when he did, getting bullied, all of these things that happened to you at school. And so this is what I was talking about earlier. Our brain comes in, our super intelligent, extremely primitive brain comes in and says, Dave is being bullied. This is dangerous. He's being ostracized. He's going to get kicked out of the tribe, or some level of survival instinct kicks in, and it creates the belief that when I put myself out there, I am in danger. So I should put myself out there less. And the interesting thing is, at that time, in your life, that was probably quite a good strategy. Like that probably actually worked for you, because the other end was, well, I could be more confident and I could push through this and go and find this and blah, 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 blah. But like that was probably the quickest way to keep you safe. So your brain did a really, really good job. The problem is it kept that pattern and nobody updated it. Nobody updated it to say, Dave is now this age. Dave now has a family, owns his own house, runs his own business successfully, had all these things, and is now putting himself out on the internet and is not going to get physically bullied. And there is no physical danger that's going to happen to you here. And so it hasn't been updated. And therefore, we run the same program or the same pattern in today's world, even though that pattern was created for 9-year-old you, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So what's the next step? Like for you personally, what is it that allows you to then overcome that resistance and kind of work with that part?
Well, a lot of therapy for me was also one of the things that helped. I did a lot of work on kind of engaging with and healing this relationship with a part of myself, a 9-year-old part of myself. So when people come to us with this presenting agenda of I just need more leads, sometimes they might be surprised at what they actually uncover about themselves, which is the thing that prevents themselves from putting themselves out there or doing the thing that they want to do.
Yeah, because someone said that to me the other day, right? They were like, I asked them, they just joined the program, and I asked them, like, what would have to happen in the next 30 days for you to be raving about this experience, for this to be the best time, money, and energy you've ever invested? And they were like, if I just had a plan about how to generate more leads. And I was like, great. So if I get a copy of Alex Hormozi's $100 leads and I put that in the post to you and send it to you, you will be happy, because I can create that in the next 2 days. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, the plan is there. Like, go and buy $100 million leads by Alex Hormozi. That is how the best way that I know to generate leads. And he breaks down all the different ways you can generate leads. The dude's done it himself. He's built a $100 million business. He's way more qualified to tell you how to do that than I am. So should we forget this whole coaching thing and you just read that book? Right. And he started laughing because he realized that that's not what he actually wanted. So going back to our original point, A, that's not what you really want, is just a plan to create more leads. And B, if it was that simple, you would have already done it. So that's what I find fascinating. And people listening to this will go, oh, this seems all a bit deep. Like, I really do just need more leads. Well, you do need more leads. Like, that's the thing that you need. But how you get those leads isn't by some magic strategy or formula. Like, the reason I'm referencing that book is because he talks about the core 4. There are only really 4 core ways to get more leads. Go and read the book. You'll know what they are. It will tell you to do it. If that solves your problem, then great. I've just made you a lot of money from listening to this podcast. My intuition tells me that that won't be the answer to your problem. Not because the strategies don't work, but because getting more leads isn't that complicated. It's not some kind of crazy mathematic formula. So if you can animate things to the point where people pay you money, if you can build websites, if you can help people with their brand strategy, then you are intelligent enough and capable enough to go and generate leads in your business. The strategy and the complexity of that strategy is not the problem. So it's not really a question to you. That's just me going on a massive rant.
But that explains it though, right? It's like the thing is that people almost don't realize what's going to happen in the conversation that we have with them. They come in thinking that we're going to tell them how to get more leads, but actually what we start doing is we start digging and we start asking questions around what's really going on. That's what I've experienced in coaching, like being coached. That's what you've experienced in coaching and being coached, and being like, well, why are we talking about my 9-year-old self? Because my coach knows that 9-year-old self, if kind of unacknowledged and unhealed, then that gets in the way of me doing or executing on the strategy. Like, we can have all of the best strategies in the world. You can go on the internet and you can study and obsess about Alex and Layla Hormozi. They'll tell you exactly how to do all these things. And then what happens is people go away and they don't do it. They don't execute on it. It's the thing that they haven't done in their business.
Yeah, they want to watch another video or follow another creator or whatever. Yeah. And by the way, we're guilty of this, right? We're not saying like we've got this shit all figured out. We're telling you this because we know how powerful it is. And I think we're also telling you this because I know how creatives' brains work. And the ADHD symptom that people often talk about is really a distraction from the things that matter and from doing the work that's actually going to get you the results that you want. So here's my invitation to you if you are listening. If you currently run a successful creative business, i.e., you have clients, you're doing the kind of work that you want to be doing, but you're just not charging the kind of money you want to be charging, or you're not getting the kind of clients you want consistently, or there's something that happens in your team where you feel like delivery is a grind and your business is just starting to feel a bit heavy, then my invitation to you is to click a link below this podcast and book a 20-minute call with Dave. That is my gift to you. There won't be an unlimited amount of slots, so you may click this link a month after listening to this podcast and it won't work and it won't be full. But if there are still some left, I would highly recommend that you take that opportunity, because in 20 minutes, we can really uncover some powerful things. There is zero sales pitch in that conversation. Is really just a conversation to figure out what that pattern is and to figure out if we can help you. If we can, we will invite you to a separate conversation. If we can't, then we will point out what we think you need to work on and maybe even recommend you to somebody else. Dave, thank you so much for jamming out with me on this podcast. And
Pleasure.
I know we will get an opportunity to do a few more of these in future. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget, please hit that subscribe button. It also really helps us if you rate this on your podcast app. So if you're listening to this on iTunes, go and give it 5 stars, or Spotify, or wherever you listen to it, go and rate it. That really helps the algorithm to share it with more people. And obviously you can manually share it with a friend as well that is really useful, or that you think might actually get something from this episode or any other episode you've listened to that you found valuable. Once again, if you want to book a call with Dave, I will drop the link in the show notes. You can click it there, subject to availability, and have a really powerful conversation. This has been the Creative Courage Podcast. Go out and be courageous, charge more money, go and approach those clients that you've been wanting to approach, and go and create some meaningful, impactful work in the world. Until next time, my name is Matt Essam. I've been joined by Dave Raybould. We will see you soon. Before you leave, if you found this episode valuable, please hit the subscribe button. Also, if you are a creative business owner doing more than 10K a month and you want to grow and scale without working longer hours or hiring a massive team, then I have something you may be interested in. We have just developed a tool that will give you a custom growth strategy based on exactly where you are in your business right now, so you can stop consuming lots of random content and trying to figure things out on your own and actually get something personalized to you. You will also receive a free copy of my book, and it will point out relevant chapters. If you'd like to take the scorecard, it's totally free. You just have to click the link in the show notes or connect with me on LinkedIn, and you will see a link in my bio. Thanks for listening. This is the Creative Courage Podcast.